I was watching Trump answer the question about the farmers.
You could play it if you want to. We're about to go in live.
I'm good.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always an honor to share with you information, news, analysis about what's going on in Mexico. And I've been doing it throughout the years, so I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning. Um, we've been following very, very closely the what's happening in Los Angeles, not only because of the impact that it's having on the Mexican community in that city. As you know, Los Angeles is the biggest city, I believe, where Mexicans actually reside after Mexico City, and I believe the city of Guadalajara. So there's an enormous Mexican community in that city, and of course, there's an enormous Mexican American community in the state of California. And of course, these raids that have been taking place that have been outraged the not the Los Angeles community. It's outraged the country literally to the point that we are now seeing protests in other parts of the United States in protest against Donald Trump's immigration policy. To talk about what is happening in Los Angeles, joining us today, and I always enjoy talking to him, is Luis Alvarado. He's a political analyst, independent political strategist from LA. Welcome to the show, Luis. Let's just talk about, in general terms, can you describe to our audience what it is like to be in Los Angeles? Is it as bad as it seems, as we can see on our screens? Is it? I mean, I know there's an insistence that the National Guard and I guess the Marines are only going to be in a small part of the city. The protests seem to be minimum right now, but I think what I can also see on the screen that there's a lot of in those images, a lot of fear. Welcome to the show. Just give us a general description of the environment. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for inviting me. As an Angelino who lived in the early 70s as a kid, watching immigration raids, our people preparing for them, or watching the Rodney King riots, this is a little bit different because I also was there for the Million People March against 187. And the difference is that
187. Can you remind our audience what was that?
187 was when Pete Wilson was governor.
Right.
He passed a law that said that the resources of the state were not to be utilized to help those undocumented. And what he meant was he was going to make sure that the children of undocumented didn't have access to the schools or school services or food, which was inhumane. And the community utilized it as a catalyst, and we took Republicans out of office. I was a Republican at the time, and ever since then they haven't recovered. It's been a Democratic state. So what we see now is various things. Number one is a humanitarian anger to see people that have been part of the fabric of society in Los Angeles. And Los Angeles being the largest, most prosperous city in the state of California, which just happens to be the fourth economy of the world that carries the red states that can't make any money. And we are being attacked for being prosperous and for not bowing to President Trump. So there's a sentiment of the political anger that comes with it, but also the anti-human anger, because when they see people that are just selling fruit, washing cars, or trying to help construction people at Home Depot being rounded up by people dressed in military attire with their faces covered, not identifying themselves, it gives a sense of fascism. It gets a sense of dictatorship in action, and it feels like the Constitution is being attacked, and that Angelinos have to defend against all of these attacks.
Now, do we have a sense who's being detained? Are they mostly Mexican nationals?
No, it's in Los Angeles. You have a combination of Mexicanos, Salvadoreños, Guatemaltecos, a lot of Central Americans, uh, and the reality is that for the most part, at the beginning when they were taking out criminals that had been asked to leave the country, the community was okay with that, right? Targeted individual, take it's a surgical strike. But now what we see is just a dragnet being tossed over the community, and watching people chasing people from a car wash, or watching them chase a farm worker, picking strawberries with a helicopter. It gives a whole sense of surrealism that Angelenos have never seen, and we're still most of them are still in a state of shock and disbelief. But even though the protests have diminished a little bit, there's a humongous protest expected on Saturday. It's the "You're Not a King" protest. Clearly defines the aspect that we're against the political actions of this administration, not just for the people that are being taken off and taken out of the country, but most of how it's being done is what's being protested.
Now, I mean, there's been a series of I know that California has been suing, the government has been suing the Donald Trump, or at least the federal government, in terms of the use of the National Guard and the decision to to bring in Marines, basically. Um, but in beyond that, what else is the state? I guess what else is the state of government, the state of California doing, and the population in general?
Well, from conversations that I've had as a few hours ago, they're organizing. They're
Hmm.
having meetings, right? They're being intelligent about how to organize and how to help and to make sure that one of the craziest things that I saw is that the MAGA Republican leadership is directing the Department of Homeland Security to investigate the nonprofit organizations that give aid and legal services to the undocumented.
Hmm.
And what they're saying is that they're being traitors and helping the terror under the terrorist act. They could be stripped of their nonprofit status,
Hmm.
which is just a political attack against those that help the undocumented. So there are many meetings that are happening with legal services to ensure that they protect the mechanisms and they find a way to actually identify those that need the services and help them without breaking the law. And and
So,
and and that's where we're at right now.
but it does seem that Donald Trump is unstoppable, at least in the short term, that they're going to continue with this strategy because, and it's important to underline, the ICE has quotas. I mean, the White House has ordered ICE that they need to stop number, a certain number of people daily in order to fulfill those quotas. Otherwise, this could affect their employment. Um, so assuming that's true, and I think it is true, and because there's been a lot of
I've heard the same
reporting on
thing.
that, yeah, that there's been a lot of reporting on that. Um, do you? I mean, there continues to be a lot of pressure. There continues to be a lot of political pressure. Where is this going?
That's a good question because it's unknown, right? I don't know if one of the interviews that I saw is where they were asking Donald Trump, how can he sustain this? And he was saying that he can't because the judicial system has to allow him to deport people without going through due process. He
Hmm.
said, I can't take 5 million people and then have 5 million trials. It's unlogical. We can't do that. We need to be able to take them out of the country without due process. And that's what the fight's about, the Constitution, right? But from a practical perspective, the ICE agents are going to have a very difficult time finding people now because they're going into hiding. And a lot of, we're seeing like an Anne Frank situation where people are keeping their parents, the children who are US born, 13-year-olds are not going to the groceries and to pay the bills because their parents are at home. Uh, and now they're gonna have to figure out how to pay the rent and get food. And
Mhm.
the organizations are trying to figure out how to help them survive this process. And then the question is, how long can I sustain this process once they start, hitting rock bottom and not being able to meet their quotas?
So, what are the quota? I mean, what are the quotas? I mean, how many people are they actually detaining? Do we have any sense?
Uh, no, we don't, because actually, I hate to say this, but when you talk about quotas, it reminds me of all these Vietnam movies
Right.
of the body count.
Hmm.
Was it a successful mission? I don't know. What was the body count? And the same situation is now, like how many people were detained, and then it's hard to believe them when they tell you how many people were detained. I did a interview 2 days ago where I was told, well, ICE has verified that the 300 people they detained, all of them have criminal history. And I said, have you proven it? Can you prove that all 300, that first of all, it was 300 and that all of them had criminal? It's hard for me to believe that the lady that was selling tamales in the corner has a criminal record. It's hard for me to believe that the guy, who was washing my car had a criminal record. So it tells me that all the information that's coming out of the White House has to be scrutinized. It can't be taken at face value. We don't have that sense of security from anything coming from the White House.
Joining us today is Luis Alvarado. He is a political strategist. He's joining us from Los Angeles. Luis, there is also, there's been a lot of questions in regards to what should the Mexican government be doing, if anything, um, considering that, a big percentage of the people being detained right now in these raids are Mexican citizens. And it's a debate that, there's been a lot of questions in regards whether, Claudia Sheinbaum actually incited these protests, which it seems unlikely because she was actually talking about, there should be protests against these taxes on remittances at the time. But it's being used politically against the Mexican government and trying to insinuate that, from Mexico, these protests or quote unquote this insurrection is being organized or is being promoted or even financed. So, what should the Mexican government be doing?
Funny is in one of my interviews in the past, I was being asked if the Chinese government was the one who was
Right.
actually paying for this, and it's unfathomable to think that that there's any foreign government involved with this. When all you see on TV and I see the people and they're just their anger is just pure. These are common,
This organic. It's an organic
incredibly
protest. Yeah,
organic,
yeah, yeah.
and yeah, you're gonna, when I was watching the protest and I saw the graffiti in the wall, I could see the A's being tagged on the wall, and the A starts for the anarchists, right? The anarchists, go all over the country looking for a good fight. And, but there is a small component of the people who are organically protesting in anger.
Hmm.
And what we're going to see tomorrow on Saturday is actually a very organic movement. I personally have, family members and people that I know that are going to be there that are, homeowners, business owners, managers, regular third generation Mexican Americans who don't even speak Spanish that are going to be there protesting because they feel it's a war against a culture, it's a war against a community that just happens to be brown.
Now, you're talking about this nationwide protests that were called on, this movement called We Have No King. That's what we're talking about,
Right.
in which it appears, I mean, if you look, the map seems to indicate that this is going to be a massive movement of people around the country, not only in Los Angeles, but it would be of course, that there would be extraordinary number of people marching in Los Angeles because of these raids that happened in the last couple of days, which raises a very but what should is this Is there anything that the Mexican government should be doing?
Going back to the Mexican government, I think I personally think to have a great leader who actually has been able to contain, I'll use that word very strategically,
Carefully, yeah.
contain the sharpness of the diplomatic efforts by the American government. Uh, and, she is preparing her government for receiving those people that are going to be taken back to their homeland. And my understanding is that the consulate general and the ambassador in the US are building networks and systems and mechanisms to help bring them back home and allow them to have a soft landing, which is much more different than probably El Salvador, where maybe the people who get taken back get automatically incarcerated and they have to prove to be innocent to be let out, right?
Right.
So it's a complete contrast between Mexico and other countries. So I think they're doing the right thing. I think Mexico is being incredibly smart and playing a three-dimensional strategies that involve preparing for the next negotiations of the trade deal, and then at the same time working with
Dealing with tariffs,
dealing
the
with the
threat of
tariffs
tariffs.
and
Yeah.
keeping an eye on the big beautiful bill that seems to be crumbling right now. And then they're
The
getting
big
ready to
beautiful bill, for just for our audience, has to do with this bill that was presented that has to do with how, you know,
the budget of
how
America, the Congress putting it through.
yeah.
And my understanding is that they're going to have a meeting in Canada pretty soon between the leaderships. And the question is, how are those conversations going to look like? And then we have all these things that are happening around the world, like Iran being bombed by Israel and other things that are going to be weighing heavy on global economic pressures. And so far, from what I've seen, the Mexican peso is getting stronger, and people in Mexico continue loving their president. And as far as I'm concerned, Mexico's doing a good job.
So where do you think this is going? Because at what there is going to be a point where the impact, it seems that there's going to be a point where the impact of these raids and the impact on the migrant community is going to be such that it's going to be reflected on the economy of the state, not only the state of California, but the U.S. economy. I mean, I'm surprised that inflation hasn't gone up. But when you start attacking those who are picking grapes and picking oranges and tomatoes and those who work in key industries like construction, there has to be a point where there is going to be an impact even on the tourism industry. Is that going to mitigate the White House strategy?
No, I mean, what I'm watching is that there's questions about, are we going to be able to host FIFA World Cup?
Right.
Are we going to be able to host the Olympics? Will this create the front lines of the pushback against this administration in California, where we're always going to feel that we're at war and we always have to carry a helmet? I mean, I hate to do
Or
the
your papers, or your papers if you're a U.S.
everybody's out there
citizen.
making photocopies of their passports to carry on, right? And I see some American born citizens, Latinos, that are actually egging on the cops, right? One of the strategies was, get them to stop you and waste their time spending with you. So if they're spending time with you, verifying your identity, knowing yourself that you're a citizen, that means they're not attacking somebody else, right? So all these little strategies are happening because human beings are going to be able to modify their existence so they can survive. And right now the question is, how do we do that? And watching it happen in real life is kind of cool.
Well, thank you. I really, really appreciate you joining us, Luis Alvarado from the city of Los Angeles, right in the middle of all this, of what appears to be a very chaotic weekend, not only because of these raids, but also this protest that is taking place against against Donald Trump. We have no king. That's the name of the protest. By the way, I didn't mention it to Luis, but there's apparently groups of Americans who are also going to be protesting here in Mexico City and Guadalajara. So it's interesting. We're going to, of course, be following this very, very closely. Luis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. Anytime.
Thank you, Luis Alvarado, political analyst from the city of LA. We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. You're listening and watching Living in Mexico. Don't go away. I'll be right back.
Very cool.